sure. You guys tell me. Did he talk about what's happening in Colombia? How there have been protests for months and there's been an uprising for months? Did he talk about what's happening in Ethiopia? There's ethnic cleansing going on there. What about Myanmar, where there's, the
I know about Myanmar.
ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya Muslim population? Did he talk about Haiti in any detail? There's a number of places, as all of you guys know, the Congo, Sudan, Yemen, where the U.S. is actively helping facilitate a genocide being carried out by Saudi Arabia against the Yemeni people, where they're starving the country, they're not allowing food or medicine in.
Yep, that's true.
Has he talked about these other countries where there's massive unrests and protests and all these gigantic problems? I don't think he's talked about it with the same kind of urgency and speed that he's talked about Cuba. But nonetheless, he decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Cuba. But he
Let's prepare for Ben Shapiro to shit on Cuba.
Somehow makes it about Colin Kaepernick. Watch.
And so I have a proposal. 1-for-1 trade. Every single dissident who wants to fly the American flag and believes in American freedom, for all of the Americans who spit on the American flag and see it as a symbol of repression and evil. How about that? Willing to make that trade right now. Now, in reality, American citizens can't be expelled simply because they don't like the flag, because we do have freedom of speech. But in principle, the folks who are marching in Cuba for liberty right now and flying the American flag are better Americans than the Americans who stand around spitting on the American flag and pretending that it is a symbol of repression and evil. You know who those people are? People who have never lived under true repression and evil. Seriously. If you live under the threat of true repression and evil, the American flag is the symbol of liberty. If you live in America, a place of liberty, we have this ungrateful, rather despicable distaste for our own freedom. We've gotten so used to being fat and lazy and rich.
Yo, I hate this dude's face. Like, his lips are weird. He has very long ears, and then he looks like a little twink.
And free. That we seem to forget that there are people all over the planet who live like that. And that for most of human history, none of that was the rule. And meanwhile, you have, again, the sickening specter of Americans kneeling for the American flag while living in the richest and freest country in the history of the world. I promise you, Colin Kaepernick would not trade places with any one of these Cuban dissidents. I promise you, Ilhan Omar would not be trading places with any one of the people living in Hong Kong right now. None of these people ever are willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to ripping the United States and talking about how evil it is.
So there's a number of things to say. First of all, if you watch his entire segment, he doesn't mention the U.S. embargo on Cuba once.
Yep.
He doesn't mention it. And I have to say, anybody who's talking about the issue of Cuba and they don't bring up the embargo, they're either incredibly ignorant on the facts, or they're stupid, or they're lying to you for ideological reasons. Now, you could take your pick. I'm not going to say which of those things Ben Shapiro is, but you can determine for yourself which one you think is the most accurate. But it is incredibly dishonest to talk about what's happening in Cuba without bringing up the U.S. embargo. We have 240 sanctions on that country. The protests were very clear.
Holy shit, 240 sanctions on Cuba? I didn't even know that shit. That is insane, dude. That is too much. Like, why? Why not just build a friendship with them, man? That's what I'm...
Clear. There's a shortage of food. There's a shortage of medical supplies. They want more food. They want more medical supplies. If the U.S. lifts the embargo, that would instantly help the people of Cuba. It's not an opinion. That's a fact. So to not bring that up and to pretend like, oh no, it's all just for, they're protesting for freedom and democracy. That's your interpretation when they said up front, immediately, the very first thing was shortage of food and shortage of medical supplies. And by the way, Ben omits what? There are now pro-government protests that are just as big as the anti-government ones. But he omits that. So he's going to omit everything that doesn't fit his narrative. That's what Ben Shapiro does. To not bring up the embargo is a crime. He did a whole segment on Cuba and didn't bring up the embargo. Now, let's get to all of his points here. He says, first, I want to trade the Americans who protest the flag for Cubans who don't. Think about what he's saying there. His point is, only Americans who agree with me, Ben Shapiro, count. So
only far right wing fucking Christo-fascist, far right Israeli, what are they called? The ones that hate the Palestinians. You know what I mean. Israeli nationalists.
all this stuff that these guys like to say about intellectual diversity and tolerance of other ideas and open dialogue and free speech and free expression, it's all bullshit. He just told you, I would rather have ideological homogeneity than have ideological diversity. That's what he just said. The Americans who want to protest the flag, I'd rather have them out of the country and Cubans who love the American flag in the country. So you want people who ideologically are more aligned with you and the ones who don't agree with you to get out. And this is the other thing. You'll see this all the time with Ben. He strawmans his opponents, and he doesn't steelman them. So when somebody protests the U.S. flag, he just interprets that as, you hate America, and you're un-American, and that's disrespectful. That's a straw man of their position. Because if you talk to people who've protested the U.S. flag, talk to Colin Kaepernick, who he brings up derisively at the end, he'll tell you exactly why he's doing it, and none of the reasons are, America's really bad and I don't like it, it's terrible, I'm against America. Nobody says that when they protest the flag.
That's bullshit.
Do you want to listen to people's actual concerns and then respond to it? Or would you rather just pretend anybody who's not on my political team hates America by definition and wants to actively make America worse?
Yeah.
Usually when people are protesting the flag, they have a broader point, and their whole point is, let's fix this issue to make America better. They're trying to improve America. But he doesn't even grant them that basic proposition. He just smears them and strawmans them, and they're all bad people, and they all just hate America. It's so lazy, and I don't know how anybody watches that and thinks he's nailing it. Then he goes on to say, this I love, because he pretends to be the facts over feelings guy. The American flag is the symbol of liberty. That's what he said. Ben, the American flag is the symbol of everything American. Everything America has done. That's what that flag represents. That's a fact. Your interpretation of it is an opinion. The American flag only represents liberty, or it represents liberty. Well, hold on now. If it represents everything America has done, it does represent the good things, but it also represents the bad things. So does it represent the Constitution and free speech and the New Deal?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It absolutely represents those things. And helping to
Slavery.
defeat the Nazis? Absolutely. It represents all those wonderful things. You know what else it represents? Slavery.
Incarceration of
Native American
Japanese.
genocide, Japanese internment.
Yep.
Nuking Japanese civilians.
Yep.
The Iraq War.
Yep.
Torture. Abu Ghraib. The list goes on and on.
Yep.
Now, you might not like that, Ben, but facts don't care about your feelings. I don't care if that triggers you. That's what the American flag is. It represents America. It represents the good and the bad. Again, I think that's obvious, but he wants to twist it in his conservative direction. Then he had the nerve to say, you know, people in this country, like Ilhan Omar, Colin Kaepernick, or people who protest the flag, they have a distaste for our own freedom. Again, massive straw man. Of course, they would concede that certain freedoms we have are wonderful. But, you know what's not wonderful? NSA spying, torture, the drug war, locking up nonviolent drug offenders, ruining lives over nonviolent drug offenses. That's not freedom. You get locked up in a cage because you sell a substance that slightly tweaks your consciousness? Nonsense. Or you've taken a substance that slightly tweaks your consciousness and you lose your life and your livelihood and you get locked up and it's all ruined? That's nonsense. Are we really free if we have millions of people who don't have health care? Are we really free if we have, you know, the minimum wage isn't even a living wage? Millions of people work full time and they don't make enough money to survive. In what meaningful sense are we free in that scenario? In what meaningful way are we free? These are all issues that need to be addressed. Now, I'm not saying I hate America. I'm saying let's improve it by addressing these things.
True, yeah.
And the attack on Colin Kaepernick was just the worst, because stop and think about it, guys. The Cubans who are protesting, they said the reason why they're protesting, they need more food and they need more medical supplies. That's what they said. So the Cubans are protesting to improve Cuba.
Yeah.
Kaepernick is protesting to improve America. He said it, hey, I want no more police killings and I want a fair justice system.
Yep.
Sure, he wants to end the drug war and free all the nonviolent drug offenders, disproportionately targeted people of color. So Cubans are protesting to try to improve Cuba. Colin Kaepernick is protesting to try to improve America because this is his country. And Ben looks at that and says, the Cubans are freedom fighters and liberty lovers and they're wonderful, but Colin Kaepernick is an ungrateful loser who doesn't appreciate America enough or whatever the fuck. It's just so childish. It's so partisan. It's so pathetic. And again, if Ben really wanted to be consistent, you know, he would talk about all the other countries that are our allies that have authoritarian repressive governments, and then there are people in the street protesting those governments. But he doesn't talk about those. Because if any protesters are nominally left-wing, their concerns are, by definition, not legit. But if they're potentially right-wing, oh, now everything they're fighting for is legit, and they're freedom fighters, and they're great people, and we should trade Americans who are on the left with people overseas who are on the right. Let's make the trade. Because I'm Ben Shapiro, and I love ideological diversity and freedom. I love freedom so much, I would ideally want to deport you if you don't agree with me about the American flag.
Yeah.